to Hour 2 of On the Block Radio with Andrew Gurevich. We're glad you're back.
Welcome back, brothers and sisters and everybody in between. This is your host, Andy Gurevich, listening to On the Block Radio. Our guest is David Gonzalez. Welcome back, David.
Hey, thank you.
You know, I just wanted to say before we jump into this next segment, the show really started with a simple idea. The slogan is authentic people doing beautiful things. And as I told you, the show is about transformation. And the idea I had was, I met you at Esalen Institute. I think 2010 was when we met, when you were there, doing the Campbell stuff. And I was blown away by your passion, your ability to connect with an audience, your ability to communicate so much emotion and so much archaic wisdom, and then to infuse it with all of this kind of vitality with, the Afro-Cuban stuff and the Latin stuff, and how, it was just such a unique experience to watch you perform, and it was so relevant. It was one of those moments where you feel like your life is different afterwards. You can kind of mark, before the experience and after it. And then we've had the ability to become friends over the years. I don't see you nearly as much as I'd like to, but every time we get together and talk, I think, Jesus Christ, somebody should be recording this conversation. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of people like that, and I think, life is a really funny thing. Every once in a while, the universe brings a confluence of some things, of experience and talent and passion and drive and authenticity that mix up into a personality that is singular in all of history, and to access these folks and kind of talk to them about what makes them tick and what they value and why they do what they do is just the drive to do that and to share that with an audience has always been a primary one for me. So, and you're one of the people that inspired that. So thank you for being here, man, and thank you for coming on the show.
Andy. Okay, well, you just stroked me. I'm going to stroke you back because
I told you I was naked in the beginning, so.
Listen, it's in conversation that we connect, and you are one of the people who, let's just put it this way, brings out the best in me. Your probing mind. Man, this whole thing is full of sexual innuendo.
Yeah.
Your probing mind.
Hey, you know what I mean? Don't fight it, buddy.
Hey.
I'll talk to Celeste. We'll sort something out. Go ahead.
It's always a joy. You know what I'm going to say. And let me read you another quick little poem to get this thing started. Because when I approach the story...
Hey, if you want to talk about how great I am, by all means, please continue. But
it's always a daring, scary thing.
Yeah.
So, how do you go into a story? How do you own a story? Where do you begin? Why this story? It's a vast... Every story has its own world, its own landscape you have to enter. So here's a little poem, just a tiny little thing. It's called High Above the Valley. High above the valley, at the very edge of a sheer cliff, a vast landscape before me, an ocean of air in front, above, and below. I take in the horizon. I take in the setting sun, the colors, the distance, and leap. Now you can interpret that as a suicidal wish, but you can interpret it as the creative leap, which is what I really think it's about. Because there's a moment, every artist has to face the blank page or the open stage or, the moment of encounter. And what stories we tell and how we tell them is it's a really big question. I think you and I met. I was telling the Orpheus Smith.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that story has become, over the years, on an artistic sense, you can call it a signature piece, something that kind of defines my style and approach. But it's also become a kind of personal religion for me. I keep coming back to it and keep on finding
Why is that?
Solace. I keep on finding solace, meaning, and deep questions are still... The questions and the answers are revealed. I think that's what myths do for us, is that they pose questions and offer up, if we invest ourselves in them, answers. I stopped becoming a man of faith or a person of faith long ago when I thought that the word faith meant belief in something substantial, some firmament. That was always a word that really confused me, firmament.
Yeah.
But when I read Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, it rocked my world to realize that faith is not rooted in substance. For me, faith is rooted in process.
Go ahead, talk more about that.
Well, I believe in the process of discovery. I believe in the processes of time and the season change, how we move through things. Those can be transformational. We find our individual points of meaning through our authentic process. So I have faith in process, and I see particularly performing arts as rituals centered on process. We are moved through these processes, and they're not didactic in what they're asking us to have faith in, but they're asking us to enter into them and to have our own authentic process to discover meanings. So what I think I try to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, what I try to do is to create moments on stage or wherever I'm encountering when I'm as an artist that are compelling, engaging, even entertaining enough so that the people who are witnessed there will be compelled to enter into their own process of discovery. I try to choose stories that don't have pat meanings, even though sometimes I do. But for example, I resisted forever. People wanted me to create a show of anti-bullying. And I didn't want to have anything that was so pat because it's just against this very idea.
This is Mad Dog and Me, right?
That I could live with. I'm sorry?
This is Mad Dog and Me is the show you're talking about, right?
Yeah, Mad Dog and Me. I finally came around to creating Mad Dog and Me. But anyway, that when I was thinking about this podcast and you gave me a few words to bounce off of, that came to me like, I can own the word faith again through in this area. And there was a crisis in my childhood about, what you're supposed to believe in. I was raised Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
And this metaphysic was really low, heavy ceiling. And it was through first an abandonment of running out of that place that was liberating. But then there's this kind of questing that happened, like what's the next structure I can have faith in? And they kept on crackling and breaking apart. And it wasn't until, a confluence of a few things in my life. One, Hero with a Thousand Faces. 2, Ernest Becker's work, The Denial of Death. 3, my own Gestalt therapy. And 4, entering into the world of service through art, that the sense of process as I just believe in authentic personal process, especially in arts experience. Whenever anything is too pat, it becomes like an entertainment. It becomes a morsel. Piece of art is going to have depth and complexity that's going to invite a process.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. You said a couple things there that I want to return to. The Orpheus and Eurydice story, the myth that is the first thing I saw you perform at Esalen during your work there. This originates in Ovid's account. Is that correct?
It's a much older account. That's one where it's kind of marked as, let's call it the definitive reading of what was up until then an oral tradition.
And the fascinating thing about Ovid is it's a meditation on transformation and passion. And nature and mortality as well. And what I love about the story is that it's not easily reduced to a kind of pat meaning. Two things that come up. I've been able to get closer to Bob Walter from the Campbell Foundation, who you also know over the past few years, and have told him almost exactly. I might have used slightly different words, but I told him the same thing that you just said, which is that Campbell, among others, gave me a way back to faith, gave me a way to come back to an understanding of faith. It really has process, and not for looking for something behind the universe, but to look for mystery and awe within the structures of the universe itself and how it reveals itself. And the fascinating thing also about this to me is in the Orpheus story, right? This kind of it's scary. man, and there's pain in it. And we recently just had Brian and Wendy Froud on the show. Do you know those names?
I'm afraid I don't.
Brian Froud is considered probably the world's foremost fairy artist. He did those books in the 70s and 80s, and now on fairies and goblins and trolls, those huge like coffee table books. And he was also a technical advisor on The Dark Crystal and on Labyrinth. And his wife Wendy worked on both of those movies, and also is credited with being the mother of Yoda. Because she was the puppeteer who fabricated Yoda and actually worked the puppet with Frank Oz on the set of Empire Strikes Back. And I got to talk with them a lot about their work with Jim Henson. And this leads me into my next question for you. And they said, because Henson did a series of myths that they redid using live actors and puppets, right? And they were serious, so they weren't cartoony. And one of them they did, I don't know if you've ever seen it, is the Orpheus myth.
What was that show called?
I gotta find it. You can find it on YouTube. I came across it in doing research for a World Lit class that I teach, but I just looked up Jim Henson, Orpheus. Yeah,
Orpheus.
And it comes up, and it was a program he did on classical myths, and they did a few of them, and he said something fascinating in discussing this and other things that he did, like The Dark Crystal. He said that he saw an importance in introducing children to the concept of fear, and this is why he did The Dark Crystal. Also, he said, I think it's a mistake to not introduce kids to some of these larger concepts that deal with the kind of mystery of the universe and the chaos of nature, and even concepts of mortality. I mean, there's a way to do it that doesn't traumatize children, but that Henson thought it was a mistake to never challenge children to address this emotion of fear, because then when these things did come up in their lives, they would have not, because it serves the same function as it does for us. Aristotle said that, drama helps us purge these emotions of pity and fear. It's kind of a trial run for when these things actually do happen in our lives. And when we protect children from experiencing any of that, we really rob them of developing those coping skills. And I just want to talk to you a bit about your work with kids and how you've done that, how you engage them, create a space that's safe for them to become aware of, process, and pursue that themselves, and still challenge them in ways that doesn't harm them. You know what I mean? It seems like really difficult work.
Well, so as a storyteller, let's just start at the beginning. There are people waiting for you in a room. It could be a large room, it could be a small room, maybe it's 5 people, maybe it's 500, maybe it's 5,000. But there's an expectation people come to hear a story. The storyteller is not on stage yet. The storyteller is waiting to come on stage. Up until that moment, the storyteller has got a mortgage to pay. The storyteller has got a prostate issue.
Yeah.
The storyteller has got, X, Y, and Z. But there's a moment where you cross the threshold. And in that moment, and different people have different approach to this. So my approach is informed by, and I use this word cautiously because it has a lot of baggage. But I approach it with a shamanic perspective. In that, I take responsibility for, number one, creating a sense of rapport, of trust, and engagement. So I'm on stage. The minute I get there, the first thing I want people to know, to be A, interested, B, curious, C, feel that they are in good hands. So this is where craft comes in. You have to have mastery. You don't want to go to a second-rate shaman.
Yeah.
You need to go. So, and this is so often overlooked because good intentions will not do it. Mastery of craft is what will do that. Of course, mastery of craft alone won't do it. You have to have the good intentions. But once you have the right intention and the mastery of craft, you can develop the kind of rapport that will allow the shamanic work to happen, and that is to bring people on a journey. And these are journeys, like I was talking to you before, where the processing of psychic imaginative material can happen authentically for the individual at their level, where they are at the time, including the dangers that you've been talking about. So, each story has its own arc, its own content, its own material, its own, in a sense, purpose. I do not shy away from stories that have violence, loss. Orpheus itself is a tragedy. It ends as a tragedy.
Yeah.
And my reading of Orpheus is through a jazz perspective. At the end of Orpheus, Orpheus is crying, and I mime and I play like Bobby McFerrin type saxophone.
Yeah.
And it's whining. It's despair in the voice and in the sound. It won't come across on the phone now, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And the last words are, no, Orpheus did not live happily ever after.
Yeah.
And we hold that because that's the truth. And I often get questioned about that. And it's that sometimes it's like that. A, B, those pains are motors for us to examine and move forward. In my own life, things I've suffered with and continue to live through, I try to put into my work. I try to use that as a motor to move forward.
That's alchemic,
not
isn't
always
it?
Successfully. Come again?
That's alchemic. I mean, you used the word shamanic before. I have a colleague who's a wonderful author named Lydia Yuknovich, who we're going to have on the show here. Depending on when your show adds, she might already be on the show when your ads or air, excuse me. But she says that she's trying to alchemize the dark in her writing and turn it into something beautiful. And I get a real sense of that from what you're saying here as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you one other thing that's very interesting to me. Like sometimes, like I tell a story where this kid is being tested. It's a Guarani, it's an Indian tribe in the northeast corner of South America, where this kid has to cut off the tip of his pinky as part of an initiation. Cut that last joint off. That's just part of his initiation into manhood. And these are kids, like middle school kids, urban setting, tough. You could imagine the kind of content these guys are watching.
Yeah.
Saw 17,009.
Yeah.
You get it. Like every possible, Tarantino movie.
Right.
I tell this story. I'm face to face with them. When this kid cuts off his finger, there's gasps. There's something you would never hear when in a movie theater. It's because the presence that has been ritualized. I'm telling the story to you, individual sitting there, Bobby sitting in the third row, and I'm not shying away from the human suffering. That's real because this human, is telling you human being, that this is what is happening. There's a sense of power, dread, foreboding, terror, pain. But the fact that it's contextualized within a story and that we have this trust, it's like, okay, I can take that and I can accept that is part of what the truth is somehow. And I'm using the word truth in quotation marks here.
Yeah, sure.
But we don't shy away from
truth.
the truth.
I hear you there, man.
At the same time, it needs to serve whatever the good is. I firmly believe in sustaining innocence. And that's a very big, hard topic these days.
That's
where
interesting.
The line of innocence gets drawn, but
that's interesting you say that, and we're coming up on another break. Do you have time to stay around for one more segment?
let me just check the time 1 sec. Hang on.
Yeah.
I'm having too much fun. Yeah, I can.
We'll do one more segment. That's great. So we're going to take a break in a second, but what you just brought up about preserving innocence, it reminds me of, you ever read, I'm sure you have you come across the poetry of William Blake?
Oh, yeah.
So Blake has, the songs of innocence and songs of experience.
I don't know about those.
Okay, yeah, it's a collection of poems that are broken into two sections, and there's songs of innocence and songs of experience. And he juxtaposes not innocence and guilt, but innocence and experience. And and frequently he'll have a poem called Thursday, and in the Songs of Innocence, it's kind of written about this, watching a procession of children in a parade, and it's this kind of like a metered, measured, presentation of something kind of trite, and then but beautiful. And then in Songs of Experience, it becomes much more sinister, not necessarily evil or wicked or dark, but just more kind of messy. And there's a lot of folks that have looked at this idea, poets included and philosophers, that say the opposite of innocence is not guilt in this particular sense, it's experience, and that the mystical encounter, when one has that shamanic, that Campbellian, that Jungian, if we come up with these phrases, when one can bypass a lot of these intermediaries and somehow connect directly with whatever we want to call the ground of being or the source, there's a new innocence that emerges that is an innocence that's born of experience, not one that exists that's sheltered from it. And this is the kind of goal of most mystical traditions, is to return a kind of childlike wonder of the world and of the cosmos, but that is informed by one's actual experience of the living cosmos as opposed to not. And I really hear that coming through with what you're saying here.
Well, let me end the segment with another little poem.
There he goes. I love it. All day long, man. As much as you want to read, we'll take it.
There's a universe growing in my basement.
Mine too, but that's another story.
There is a universe growing in my basement, designed by drunken butterflies and blind astronomers. There is a universe growing in my basement, designed by drunken butterflies and blind astronomers. Unseen forces jiggle everything. Dust, magnetism, elemental matter, and pure light. Nebulae and mitochondria all expanding, radiating out toward the horizons of destiny, drawn by the pulsing beacon of the Sacred Heart.
That's beautiful.
That's the best I could do on that.
Hey, well done, man. All right, we're going to go into our final break. You are listening to On the Block Radio with Andy Gurvich. Our guest has been the very gracious David Gonzalez. We're going to be back in a minute. I'm going to leave you with a quote about David's storytelling from Deepak Chopra, who says, David Gonzalez speaks with courageous humanity and brilliant creativity. His poetry and stories uplift the spirit and inspire wonder. Not bad words from a person that many people respect in this area. All right, David, you good? Hold on for one more segment?
I am.
You got it, folks. We will be right back after these words.
Hello, my name is Wendy Froud, the mother of Yoda, and you're listening to On the Block Radio.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Blackened canyons of the Cross Bronx Expressway, solid still, after Europe, Korea, Da Nang, and the assassinations of the 60s. Solid still after trickle down to a dry choke economics, after Watergate and Contragate, after Lindsey Bean, Koch, Dinkins, and Giuliani, after Grenada, Somalia, Desert Storm, and Bosnia. Still the blackened canyon walls of the Cross Bronx hold back the crush of Jerome Avenue, Webster Avenue, and the Grand Concourse. state of the L. Holding back the push of Pepe and Papo, holding back with brick on bedrock. You know, Bronx homies are the craziest. Lined up at the fences looking down to the traffic crossing town. Out past Bruckner to 95 North. From the house that Ruth built, baby. To the Yankee world of New England's white clapboard and black shutters. And they do shut tight
on the sights and sounds from West Farms and the Bronx River projects.
The George Washington Bridge to America is all tied up, corrupt, and the toll is too high for too many. So they stay with El Bronx tattooed onto their lives. And the Shadow Canyon cross Bronx cleaves, leaves, lungs scarred by exhaust and itchy burning eyes that water for freedom. But this is no land of the free. This is the Bronx. And the homies and the jibaros be lined up, watching from the overpass, thinking, to what worlds are they bound? To what worlds are they bound?
Welcome back to the program, everybody. This is your host, Andy Gurvich, and we are here with David Gonzalez for our final segment. David, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
I wanna go back to something we were talking about with storytelling. But first, actually, in our earlier segment this is something I've been thinking about since you told the Oliver Sacks story about those guys with Tourette's. And I wanted to hit something back with that again, and in no way to make fun of people that actually suffer with Tourette's, because it's not a funny thing. But what I'm fascinated with is this idea, like you said, you and everybody else in the room knew that these people on the stage dressed in the Indian clothes and playing this music weren't pulling it off, right? But the polite thing to do is not say anything about it. Is to not say that it sounds horrible. But these guys say out loud, hey, that sounds horrible, right? And in one sense, that's a social violation, but in another sense, that must be very freeing. And I just wanted to ask you about this notion of truth-telling in the world. As a storyteller and as an artist, I know every once in a while I get on this kick where I get self-righteous and I go, people need the truth, damn it, and people need me to tell them the truth, and the truth, and then I realize, you can't handle the truth. Usually that's what I say when I just want to say something mean to somebody, but I can't handle I kind of make my living. I don't think I would be able to go out in the world if people told me the truth about what they thought about me sometimes. And so, you know what I mean? It's this double-edged sword. In one sense, we have an agreement in society to kind of not be too honest with one another, to sort of maintain these social relationships, but it must be kind of freeing to just say what you want to say. This music sucks. You know what I'm getting at?
Oh, totally. And I think that that's a really interesting border zone for the arts in general, let alone for just civic discourse. But we're also refreshed. Every once in a while, you go to a dinner party or you meet someone, and they're like not holding back. And you realize, whoa, this is kind of dangerous, but I kind of like the freedom that's happening here. And we've all had that experience, too, of when we, just lay it out the way it is. And, and the pretenses fold away. Art functions like that in a lot of different ways. Certainly, difference between entertainment and art is that art is trying to wake up the moment of perception, where entertainment tends to reiterate what's already known. And that waking up it's kind of a truthful telling. Like, what is sparking? What is going to cause you to take notice of something? What is going to shift your perception? And oftentimes that's truth-telling. That's not necessarily my bailiwick. That's going to come out sounding really lame, but not that I don't tell the truth. But my work is that old adage where theater, and I think story too, is the truth told through a beautifully wrought series of lies. We suspend the, at least my style of storytelling, we work really hard to suspend the moment of consensual reality, so that this imaginative world can open up, so that this symbolic language can start to function in the unconscious mind and collectively. So, there are some storytellers who really go for the jugular with that kind of, and it's really the work of poetics more than storytelling, I would dare to say.
Yeah, it's true. Two author friends that I know, Lydia Yuknovich, I've talked about her once in this interview already, and she talks about how there's the membrane between fiction and nonfiction, she says, is as thin as an infant's skin. And she says when we're writing a fiction, we're always drawing on our actual experiences and perceptions, and when we're writing nonfiction, we're always constructing realities and identity and place. And so one is always bleeding over into the other. And there's a wonderful author named Tom Spanbauer, who I would love to introduce those people in our audience that don't know him, who teaches a writing workshop called Dangerous Writing. And he says that he wants to use lies or deception or fictions in order to make the truth truer, if that makes any sense. And I feel like it's exactly what you're saying, that it's a mechanism to sort of lay bare some fundamental aspect of reality, but we have to go to it through this, kind of sideways sometimes.
Yeah, one of the dangers in storytelling is that there tends to be this sense of sort of an earnest possession of the moral truth. So I, to hang out in some certain storytelling circles, it can sort of make your blood boil a little bit. The sense that it's because the story has its wisdom doesn't mean the teller has earned that wisdom.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean?
That's a really good point.
There's often a confusion in that. And that's why, for me, myths and fairy tales are really draw me, because they're sort of open, multi-layered, complex, kaleidoscopic, three-dimensional, and you can keep coming back and back and back. And then finally, for me, what nourishes me more than anything is non-verbal music. Music that does not have the sort of speech and language in it, because I'm already then hooked into my reflective mind. But with direct music, symphonic music, all kinds of instrumental music, and jazz, especially for me, is where my imagination can really flow, where I'm deeply nourished. At the same time, I make my living as a storyteller and as a poet.
Well, I want to ask you about that in a second here in our closing minutes, but you bring up something really interesting there in the distinction between a storyteller that believes they are in sole possession of a moral truth, and storytellers who aren't like that and who are more dialogic or symbolic in their storytelling. And I think the difference is one of relationship to the audience. One is the audience is kind of a passive viewer of the experience who has this wisdom imparted to them from the storyteller. And, in teaching, we're really trying to move away from this in education. They call this in academia the sage on the stage model. And the professor with all this knowledge who stands in the front of the room, and you sit down, shut up, and write it down. I know things you don't, and there'll be a transference of knowledge here. I mean, yes, there's a little bit of that because people are paid to be experts in things and then help people who are not experts in them become experts in them. So there's a little bit of, passing on of technique or knowledge, but especially in the humanities, especially in the arts, that's not what you want. You want creative participants in the experience. And I think that's one of the things I've always appreciated about your storytelling is the audience isn't let off the hook where you're just the guy in the front that's going to give them all the answers. They're a part of this thing from the very beginning. And I think that's what is the most ancient form of storytelling, and that's where it folds back to myth. But I wanted to ask you, how did you become a good storyteller? I mean, I get accused all the time of, my friend Jenny says that my stories lack a climax, and if I had $1 for any time a woman told me that something I was doing lacked a climax, I'd be in a different financial situation. Let's leave it at that. But in all seriousness, yeah.
Well, the old adage, how do you get to public school 126?
Yeah.
Practice.
Yeah, so that's where the 5,000 audiences come in, huh?
It will also lead you to Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
Listen, it starts with a spark. It starts with a spark and something that you must do. One must do this. One must do it. And that's a mystery. That goes back into depth psychology and even into a sense of like personal testing.
Uh-huh.
But then, for me personally, it meant, okay, I must do this. I will do it. Okay, that sucked. Okay, but what did work? Oh, that. Let me model. Let me look. Let me visit others. Okay, this moment is working. This moment is not working. Training. Okay, my training was a really strange backdoor world into this. I had extensive music training.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of observing in the New York theater and the underground theater and stuff like that, the East Village back in the day. But I also was studying Ericksonian hypnosis and Gestalt therapy and all these techniques of presence and awareness. And so I became keenly aware of the audiences I was volunteering in front of, even in my sort of like early 20s and mid-20s. I'm in my late 50s now. But in the keen observation of what is working and then why, and then coming back and doing it again and honing and doing it again and honing, that's gotten to a place of, let's just call it efficiency. Then you got to go, okay, well, what's the next challenge? And keep, can that work? What's the next? What's the information loop there? And so for me, my process has been doing it in front of people. And then being pretty severely self-critical about what's working and what isn't working. A. B, get help. So I'm lucky to live in a place where I'm surrounded with quite a few geniuses who are willing to take a look at my work from time to time and say, what if, or why don't you try X, Y, or Z might land it better than any of those things. And so I've had a few collaborators, most notably Leonard Petit, who's an expert in Michael Chekhov's acting technique. I'm not an actor, but Leonard understands what I do, this conflux of movement, sound, gesture, and text.
Hang on one second. We're having an audio issue. Okay, go ahead. Keep talking, Leonard.
Leonard Petit is an acting teacher and an expert in Michael Chekhov's acting technique. And not that I'm an actor, but Leonard understands what I do in trying to use these varying languages of sound, text, gesture, and style to bring a fairy tale or a story to life. And, he has taught me so much from his vast storehouse. And also, I'm just going to name some people who've been deeply influential. David Schechter, the great theater artist, and a whole host of other folks. So,
you bring up a good point. Oh, I'm sorry. Finish. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to reiterate that, in a nutshell, it's spark, risk, observation, and get help when you need it.
That last bit, the whole thing is actually really substantive as a response, but that last bit really speaks to me. Portland has this really exciting literary community where some wonderful authors have come and continue to come out of this. My wife and I go to a lot of readings in town, and the level of consistent talent here is stunning. We're actually going to be featuring some of these authors in coming episodes of the program. And one of the things that makes that so is the fact that the community is really invested in one another. People workshop each other's pieces. They go listen to each other read. They offer critiques. It's really, they're invested in one another as an artistic literary community. And New York is a place that, in many ways, it's cutthroat, it's fast-paced, it's everyone for themselves. But then you find pockets of people, especially within particular aspects of the artistic world, where people really take the time to invest in one another and help each other excel and craft. And so you've really hit into something there. So
that's very, very true.
This, when I was doing research for the show, I came across a model you've developed called the Four Rivers model of storytelling, this confluence model. And as a mythologist and as somebody who is always interested in symbols, every time someone starts talking about rivers and confluence, my ears perk up because this is again primary stuff. So tell us what that is, if you don't mind.
Well, back in the day, I was invited to. I don't know if this thing still exists, but it's called the Rainbow Gathering.
Yeah.
I think it kind of predated Burning Man by 25 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a back to the earth, free love, hippie gathering kind of thing. But I went to one, and it was a wonderful experience, and it was at the Monongahela National Forest, which is in West Virginia, a sacred space because 3 rivers gather there, and it's a profoundly beautiful place.
Wow.
But I was always very moved by it. And growing up in New York City, where you have the confluence of the Hudson, the East River, the Harlem River, you have Long Island Sound, Hudson Bay, the ocean. So that whole sense of flowing is like deep inside me. When I took a step back to look at what I do and how I do it, I had to isolate and deconstruct what are the elements. And I came up with this simple model, which is that there are 4 rivers that run through it. One is the river of text, that is the words that specify the ideas, situations, the characters, and the journey. 2 is the voice, the sound of those words, and how the sound of the words completely changes what those words mean. Are you there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my phone just did something wacky. Yeah, so,
I just don't want to interrupt. Sorry. Yeah, go for it.
No, that's all right. So like you say, the dog is outside. And you can say, oh, the dog is outside, or the dog is outside. The dog is outside. And each one means something totally different.
Yeah.
So we look at language as a confluence of text and sound as 2 equally powerful streams. Thirdly is this embodiment, how the body, the character is expressed in movement and facial gestures, in the nuances of the smallest movements of the fingers and the slightest shifts of weight. All these things are conveying meaning. And so those are the 3 expressive functions that I really work with folks on. And it comes out of my own, my own process. Sure. And the 4th river is what I would call style and imagination. And that's where each person has to solve this equation for themselves. What is the impulse? Some people are really gregarious and big, and some people, like my dear departed friend John Colligan, he never would get out of a chair and barely use his arms, but his sense of speech was so exquisite. He didn't need it.
Yeah.
He was so compelling. So I call my model the confluence model, and it's about the 4 rivers and how they gather together. But like I always say, man, the most important thing is finding a good story. Because once you have a story that you must tell, you will tell it well. 9 times out of 10. The motivation to tell a story will make it land in with your audience.
Yeah, heart makes up for a lot of missing technique in certain situations, is it not?
Well, that's true, but
when you can put both together, and then you're really cooking.
Then you're cooking.
How does a couple more questions, man, and then we will release you to what you're doing. How does the sense of place figure into your storytelling in with your art? I mean, even maybe particularly with the work you're doing with the farmers now, it just seems to me that setting, that place is almost rises to the level of being a character in some of your work.
Interesting question. Yeah. Well, let's see. Let me just set up a polarity. So I was performing at the Kennedy Center not long ago, and all the magic. It takes set up a new show. It takes 3 days, 3 10-hour days to do a tech.
Wow.
Every light has to be adjusted, the intensity, and has to go with that light. And there's a shadow in it, and there's the light cut. That is it a straight line, or is it a curved line? Is it blurry on the edges? Is it tight? And then there are 148 of those.
Wow.
And they have to be timed, like how long does it take to come on? How long does it take to go off? And that's just light. Then you have the movement and the blocking, and then you have the video design and the sound design. And blah, 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 blah. So in that context of the grand stage,
Yeah.
it greatly affects how what you do and how it works. So the wonder and the possibilities of stage magic are very, very real. And now I'm doing a project with Mexican farm worker communities, and I am tomorrow going to be at a community center in the evening. People get off work. They're seeing their kids. We have food for them. They're going to sit down. It's going to be fluorescent lights. It's a room that's used for like 19 different events throughout the week. You might call it chaotic or creative or some kind of chaotic creativity. And folks come in, and there's babies sitting nursing on their mom, and dudes are coming in, they haven't seen each other, they give a big hug, and and it's a story, but what trumps everything there is that people are gathering, and you got to make it so it's real. What trumps everything is community.
Yeah.
And so there, the nuance is in finding the true moment where the transmission of story can happen. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a short little thing. Maybe it's in English with some Spanish. Maybe it's fully in Spanish. Maybe there's a call and response that draws in the grandmother. Maybe we're just sitting in a small circle. Maybe we got the kids to dance for a few minutes because that's the only way they're going to stay in. But the point there is we're going to use the technologies and the reality of that place and that time to make the magic happen there. And this is one of the blessings of my life, is that I have opportunities. Like 1 week I'm at the Kennedy Center, or 1 week I'm at a community center, and I need them both. Yeah. I would not trade one for the other ever, ever, ever. I don't know if that really answers your question, but the sense of formality and context dictates how it gets done, but it never changes the intent of what can be accomplished in terms of transmission and a sense of community building.
No, that answers it absolutely. Did you ever see the movie Wasteland? Do you know this movie?
I don't think I do.
Excuse me, got a bug in the throat. It's a documentary about an artist that you might know, a New York artist. Well, I don't know if he's solely in New York, named Vic Muniz. Do you know his photography? Okay, so the book, or excuse me, the film kind of follows the work that he does, and the audience should check this out too. It takes place just outside of Rio de Janeiro at a place called the Jardim Gramacho, which is the world's largest garbage landfill, biggest one on the planet. And what Muniz does is he goes down there. He spends some time with the men and women who pick through the refuse. Who get paid, $1 a day to pick out recyclables and things through the refuse, and they actually live along the border of the dump. They're called catadores. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And what he does is he, after getting to know each of them and their stories, they pick materials from the dump, right, and they bring them to a warehouse, and then he recreates classic, like iconic paintings, portraiture and paintings from Renaissance Europe, right?
Wow.
And he recreates he takes a picture of one of these people, say, at the dump, in one of these classic poses, the Mona Lisa or something, right? One of these women, and then they go into this warehouse and they project from up high onto the floor. That image, and then people come in with thousands of pounds of garbage and fill it in, right, on the floor to recreate the image out of the garbage, and then he photographs that.
Wow. I think I know this artist. He's done,
he's done other things.
Warehouses with metal and all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, and it's always, so he did another project in the Caribbean where he went to one of the islands where there were sugar plantations, and he noticed that, he took these photographs of these vibrant, happy, beautiful children playing on the beach just with the spark in their eyes. And then he would meet their parents and older siblings who worked in sugarcane plantations, and these people were broken and frustrated and you know what I mean, and just had so much of the spark of life had come out of them because of this grueling and dangerous work they do on sugar plantations. And so it was miraculous to him, as he puts it, to see that sugar had taken the sweetness out of life for these people. And so he photographed the children and then reproduced the photographs with colored sugar into these portraits that then sold at auction, and then the money goes back to these families on the island. And so I'm just interested, and where I'm going with all of this is that I've always sensed, we've talked about this throughout the show, but I've sensed in your art something different, but something similar. And where I'm going is this: do you know the griot tradition in Mali?
Yes.
The Mali epic of Sanjara is the Mali. It's the Mali epic. When Mali opened up to the West, we found that they had their own epic literary tradition that rivals that of the Mahabharata in India, the Iliad and the Odyssey in Greece, so on and so forth. Gilgamesh, it's the Mali epic, and it's the story of Sanjara as a prince. And one of the main characters in the epic that continues to be an important character in Mali tradition is the singer. And what the singer does for the community or for the rich family, not always, even non-affluent families will frequently have a griot. People travel the country doing this kind of professionally, and they even have like competitions where singers will go against one another. And excuse me, they have to do something that's a combination of a couple of things. They have to sing these songs that are at the same time immediate and ancient. They have to tell the story of the people, tell the story of their ancestors, tell the story of their mythology and their emergence, but also fold in things into the story in real time that bring the audience and bring the family or the individual they're speaking to into it. And so it's always it's what James Baldwin said in Sonny's Blues. He said that though the story of our suffering, meaning the African American community, is something that we all know and we all live, we have to have it told back to us again and again from time to time, and so we can see it in new ways. And I really see a component of that in your work. And I'll turn this into a question, or at least stop talking in a minute. But there's another film I want to mention called "I'll Sing for You," which is about a Malian musician named Karkar, who was very influential in Malian independence and kind of sang a lot of songs that became kind of anthems for that. And there's a movie about him called "I'll Sing for You," which is about his journey back to Mali for the first time in several years to kind of come back in contact with all of those people. And it's a kind of bittersweet film, but the griot tradition is very much alive in that film as well. And so I could be mistaken in this, but I kind of see you as a modern American griot. Do you resonate with that, or is that something that is not part of how you see yourself? No. Okay. Well, I just wasted your and the audience's time for the last 10 minutes, but go watch those two films. So no, why not?
Because I've met a griot. I've met a real griot.
Okay.
I know griot from not griot. It's a word that gets tossed around a lot.
Yeah, like shaman, right.
Yeah, in storytelling circles especially. Mm-hmm. But, I tell fairy tales and myths.
Okay.
And I do that with music. I try and bring great live music, world-class music, stunningly beautiful, inspirational music, and great stories to the stage. That's what I do. I do community arts and access work. The griot tradition is something that is very particular,
yes,
very rooted. And the best example that I know is a guy named Curtis Lamkin. Curtis with a K, Lamkin, Lamkin. I was reading poetry at the Dodge Poetry Festival, which is an incredible biannual event that happens in New Jersey. And Curtis was there. I didn't know the guy. And he started, never writes his poetry down. It's strictly oral.
Wow.
He'll tell you a poem that will run for 40 minutes. And he'll play his kora, his dusunguni, his West African instrument, and he's naming names and contextualizing current events and current history, his own perceptions within mythological time.
Wow.
And he's a timekeeper and a truth teller, like we were saying before.
Yeah.
And that's a tradition which I have healthy respect for, courageous, brilliant work. But that's not what I do. People want to check out Curtis. You should. And that is the best example that I know of a contemporary griot. Another interesting person is, his name is escaping me, Al Letson. Al, he's got a radio show on called The State of the Reunion.
Okay.
Al Letson is an interesting guy. He's kind of a griot. He's using journalism in an interesting kind of way, but he's a poet, writer, performer as well. Those are two people who I really like.
How dare you come on this program and plug another radio show?
Sorry, man.
I'm just kidding, man. No, we're not about that. No, I support people that are doing this work, that are doing relevant work. That's what the whole show's about. So that's great. Well, David, this has been great, man. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I wanted, before you close, I had this last little poem I'd love to share with you.
Absolutely.
If I could.
Please.
And let me just say what a joy it is to be part of your radio world. And I really wish you great luck with this.
Thank you so much, man.
So there were two bits of information that gathered together to birth this poem. On one side, it was that story of the 100th monkey, which I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are these kind of potatoes on this island, and they fall to the ground, but they're kind of yucky. The monkeys look at them. They're like, I don't want to eat this. Forget it. Finally, there's 99 monkeys. This happens. The 100th monkey picks one up and says, you know what? I'm going to take it down to the water. I'm going to wash it off. Then I'm going to take a bite. And you know what? Suddenly, all the monkeys do it.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but there's some simultaneity. Boom, whoosh, on another island atoll, a distance away, the same behavior happens. Now, I don't know where contemporary science is with this, but it was a kind of wonderful idea, nonetheless. The other bit of information was I read a few years ago that scientists trying to get ever faster computers. So I went to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory not too long ago as well. It confirmed this. And that is, scientists are working on with atomic structures, the movement of electrons to be switches. So on, off, 0, 1. Coding they're playing with how the spin of electrons could do this, as opposed to some other mechanical or whatever kind of processes. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but and that they were doing mind studies, like if you could think it, would it actually change? And there was some success happening with this, kind of like telepathic, woo-doo-woo-doo kind of thing. But,
we're going to have a guy named Ryan Maznam on I don't mean to interrupt you, on the program in the coming weeks, and he's really one of the leaders in this area of biocomputing and biotech, and so it's fascinating stuff.
So typically as a New York Times reading liberal, I just grabbed that juicy bit and wrote this little poem. It's called Entanglement, which is what that whole theory is about. It's called. So entanglement. Now that the scientists have caught up with us, will love catch on like the 100th monkey with the sweet potato at the beach? We knew from the beginning that entanglement was the only efficient way forward. The elegance and ease, the instantaneous transmission, the recognition from afar. Somewhere in Pasadena, locked in a research lab, bare but for a single candle, two solitary souls sit facing one another in silence, experimenting with the new technology that says, what happens here can happen there. When I move, you move. When you move, I move. When I move, you move. When you move, I move. When I move, you move. When you move, I move. We are connected.
What a beautiful way to end the program. Thank you so much, man.
It's been a joy. Thank you, Andy.
Let me just close this out. And can you hang on for a second after I close the show? I have another question for you.
Sure.
All right, so hang around just for a sec. You've been listening to On the Block Radio with Andy Gurvich. Our guest has been the artist, poet, spoken word master, David Gonzalez. Go to his website, which we have on our website, www.ontheblockradio.com. to learn more about David's work, David's art, DVDs of the stuff that he does, and maybe even bring him to an event center or a school near you. I want to end with a quote about the work you do that was in the New York Times that goes, "As long as David Gonzalez is around, the venerable art of storytelling is in safe hands. He has the gift of creating magical worlds and drawing his audience into them." Thank you so much for being here, David.
Thank you.
Folks, we will see you next week with a brand new episode. Thank you for listening. Find us on Facebook and Twitter and at www.ontheblockradio.com. See you folks next week.
You've been listening to On the Block with Andrew Gurovich. The show is produced in Portland, Oregon by Michael DiNapoli at MD Productions. Theme music by Cat Power. Closing music by Jonathan Oak. Look us up on the web at ontheblockradio.com, where you can also link to us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Previous episodes can be found on our website. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you beautiful kitties. Oh, look at you out there. Creators of art, of history, of thought.
Days after Pablo Neruda's death, an eagle was found violently flapping its wings within the boarded-up house that he had called home. Speculation number 1. Neruda had built the eagle's nest twig by twig, poem by poem, and had warmed its egg for a lifetime. Speculation number 2. Neruda's soaring spirit coalesced into the winged creature. Speculation number 3. The private in the Chilean security forces, whose job it was to board up Neruda's house, had read 100 poemas de amor y una canción desesperada, and in his first act of defiance, had placed the magical bird within the house for all to hear, for all to see, for all to wonder. Speculation number 4. Spirit bird Pablo, flying heavenward, suddenly turned back to earth, squeezed in between the rough planks that shuttered his home, and furiously searched to retrieve the ink pen he was sure to need. Speculation number 5. It was Neruda's last unfinished poem, and so great was its longing for completion that it sprouted wings to seek his signature.